3 newborns, left in a hospital bassinet with no identification, no medical records. Just a handwritten note that read, "I can't raise them." The nurses called them the miracle triplets, but the mystery surrounding their birth was anything but miraculous. As authorities searched for the mother, one name unexpectedly surfaced: Chloe Rains. Everyone believed she was their biological parent, until she swore she'd never been pregnant. That's when a routine DNA test revealed something so unexpected, so disturbing, it would turn an entire hospital upside down and spark an investigation no one saw coming. What truth had been hidden behind the walls of that hospital? And why were these babies never meant to be found? Before we dive into this emotional and shocking story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. This is another unforgettable journey from Mr. Edward's Tales, where true emotion lives, and every story makes you reflect on life. Rachel Foster slammed the storage room door open with a swift push of her hip, juggling a clipboard and a list of inventory items hastily scrawled in pen. She wasn't supposed to be there more than a few seconds. Just grab an emergency thermal blanket and head back to the neonatal unit. But as she flicked on the light and took her first step in, she froze. At the far end of the narrow corridor between stacked boxes of medical supplies stood a wooden hospital crib. Not a storage unit, not an empty frame, a full-sized crib. Her breath caught in her throat as she took cautious steps forward, the wheels of the cart she pulled behind her screeching slightly as they rolled. Inside the crib, nestled under identical white hospital blankets, lay 3 newborns. Not dolls, not mannequins used for training, real infants. Their tiny chests rose and fell in unison, their cheeks flushed pink. She stared at them in disbelief, her mind scrambling for explanations. Was this some kind of bizarre training exercise? A prank? But then her eyes landed on the small, folded piece of paper resting against the chest of the baby in the center. Slowly, carefully, she picked it up and read the shaky handwriting. "I can't take care of them." She blinked, rereading the note twice, then 3 times. The words didn't change. Rachel's stomach twisted as her fingers tightened around the paper, her medical instincts kicking in. She leaned down, checked each baby's pulse, temperature, breathing. All normal. All recent births, no more than a day old. No identification tags, no birth certificates clipped to the crib, no hospital bracelets on their wrists. Panic started to set in, not the kind that comes with chaos, but the slow, creeping dread of realizing something wasn't just wrong, but deeply wrong. She reached into her scrubs and pulled out her radio, clicking the button with urgency. "This is Nurse Foster from Pediatrics. I need Dr. Harris in the South Storage Room, immediately. We have newborns, 3 of them, abandoned." She hesitated before adding, "There's a note." Static crackled for a second, followed by the calm voice of the night supervisor confirming the message. Rachel remained by the crib, crouched down, now whispering softly to the babies. Nonsense words, comfort sounds, anything to fill the unbearable strangeness of the moment. By the time Dr. Harris arrived, Rachel hadn't moved an inch. She stood stiffly, her eyes darting between the 3 infants as if afraid they might vanish if she looked away. Harris, a man in his late 50s with a permanent frown carved into his brow, stepped into the room with the weary impatience of someone pulled from a long-overdue coffee break. "Rachel, what on earth is so urgent that—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes locked onto the crib. Silence hung between them for a moment, and then he took a few steps forward, his voice lowering. "They're alive?" "Yes," she whispered. "And not registered. No records, no wristbands. Just this." She handed him the note. He scanned it, his expression unreadable, then leaned over the crib, squinting at the faces of the infants. Suddenly, his breath caught. "My God," he murmured. I know this child." He pointed to the baby on the right, his face pale. No, it can't be." Rachel stepped closer, her voice trembling now. "What do you mean you know him?" Harris didn't answer right away. He reached for the child, but then pulled back, his hand trembling. "I saw this baby yesterday," he finally said. "Or at least someone who looked exactly like him. A private birth. Very hush-hush. I wasn't even allowed in the delivery room. No records were made in the main system. It was handled off the books, and I didn't ask questions. But this child, he was part of that. I'm sure of it. Rachel stared at him, stunned. And the others? No idea. He muttered, shaking his head. But this confirms it. We're looking at something deliberately hidden. He turned back to her, his tone changing from shock to command. Call security. Seal this room. No one goes in or out. And contact the police. Now. Rachel nodded and turned to follow orders, but her hands were shaking too much to dial properly. She steadied herself against the wall, the weight of the moment pressing down like a lead blanket. This wasn't just a mistake. This was orchestrated. Someone had placed these babies here, someone who knew the hospital's blind spots, and someone who didn't want them found. Within 20 minutes, the hospital's head of security had sealed off the floor. The room became a hive of hushed voices, sterile glances, and procedural tension. 2 officers from the local precinct arrived. Detective Ethan Granger and his partner Liam Brooks, both still, zipping up their jackets as they stepped into the space with furrowed brows. Granger glanced at the babies, then at Rachel. Can someone start explaining? Rachel stepped forward, her tone more stable now. I found them during a routine supply run. No records, no identifiers, just that note. She pointed to Harris. And he claims he recognizes one of them. Granger arched an eyebrow at Harris, who nodded slowly. Yes, I believe one of these infants was involved in an off-record birth yesterday. There's no official documentation, but I saw the mother being wheeled into the West Wing. She was under private care. You're telling me a woman gave birth here and left no trace? Liam cut in. Not unless someone helped erase the evidence, Harris replied grimly. The implication hung heavy in the air, as the babies continued to sleep, unaware of the storm they had just become the center of. Granger stepped closer to the crib, observing the infants with a mixture of suspicion and concern. We'll need to run DNA tests, search the security footage, question every staff member who was on duty during the last 48 hours, he said, already pulling out his notebook. Liam snapped photos of the crib, the room, and the note, while Harris made a quick call to the hospital administrator. We have a legal and medical emergency, he said into the phone, and we may be dealing with child trafficking, or something worse. Meanwhile, Rachel sat quietly on a metal stool, her gaze still locked on the smallest of the 3 babies. Something about his face unsettled her. Not fear, exactly, but a deep, unshakable feeling that these children had not just been misplaced. They had been hidden, and whoever had hidden them hadn't wanted them found. She reached out and gently adjusted the blanket, covering his tiny arm. Underneath, faint bruises marred the baby's wrist, old but real. Look at this, she called. Liam walked over and saw the marks. Jesus, that's not from childbirth, he murmured. Someone handled him roughly. As the police collected preliminary evidence, Harris led Rachel into the hallway, away from the growing crowd of hospital staff gathering with whispers and glances. You need to be careful, he warned her in a low voice. Whatever this is, it's bigger than just a mother abandoning her kids. The way these babies were placed, the location, the timing, it's too clean, too intentional. Whoever did this knows how this hospital works, and they wanted you to find them. Rachel shook her head. Why me? Because you're careful, trusted. You don't overlook things. His voice dropped further. And you ask questions. Rachel felt the weight of his words settle, like stone in her chest. She didn't want to be part of something sinister. She had trained to save lives, not uncover conspiracies. But now, standing in that hallway, she knew she had already crossed a line. There was no walking back. Somewhere in this hospital, perhaps even on that very floor, was someone who knew exactly where those babies came from and what they were meant for. Back inside the room, Granger paced in tight circles as Liam examined the surveillance monitor feed from the previous night. Most of the cameras on this floor were offline for routine maintenance, Liam reported. But one camera, just one, caught motion in this hallway around 3:12 a.m. He turned the screen toward Granger. The grainy footage showed a figure in scrubs pushing a wheeled bassinet into the storage room. Face obscured, no badge, no identifiers. Can we enhance that? Granger asked. Liam frowned. I'll try. But right now we're looking at someone who knew how to avoid being seen. Granger exhaled slowly, then turned back to the infants. Let's get them transferred to a secure pediatric unit, full monitoring, around-the-clock security. Until we figure this out, no one, not even staff, gets near them without clearance. He looked around the room. This wasn't just a drop-off. It was a message. Rachel heard that last sentence from the doorway. A chill ran down her spine, not from fear, but from certainty. This wasn't over. It had just begun. We found her, Liam said, tossing a file onto the cluttered metal desk where Ethan sat reviewing the hospital's visitor logs from the past week. Chloe Rains, 29, lives in a modest apartment on Eastern Row, no criminal record, works part-time at a flower shop. We ran her face through the hospital's security footage from the West Wing the night those babies were left. She was definitely there. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying the photograph clipped to the file. Chloe had a youthful face, dark eyes, and an expression that gave away very little. And she fits the description given by that nurse who remembered escorting a nervous-looking woman toward the private maternity room. He muttered, "We need to talk to her. Now." Within an hour, the two detectives were knocking on her apartment door. Chloe opened it herself, dressed casually in jeans and a faded hoodie. She blinked at them, visibly confused. "Can I help you?" Ethan showed his badge. "Miss Rains, we need to ask you a few questions. It's about the hospital, about 3 newborns." Chloe's face paled instantly, but it wasn't the reaction of guilt, they could tell. It was confusion, laced with fear. She led them into the small, neat apartment and sat at the edge of a beige couch, fidgeting with the drawstrings of her hoodie. "3 newborns?" she asked, looking from Ethan to Liam. "What does that have to do with me?" Ethan sat across from her, placing the photo from the hospital footage on the coffee table. "You were at St. Mary's the night they were found. The footage confirms it." Chloe frowned, staring at the image. "Yes, I was there, but not for what you think. I was visiting someone, a friend who had surgery. I didn't go near maternity." Liam leaned forward. "Do you know anything about a private delivery that happened that night? 3 babies, left in a storage room. No mother, no record, just a note." Chloe's eyes widened. "That's horrible, but I swear I don't know anything about it." Ethan paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Miss Rains, we have a witness who described someone matching your appearance entering the private maternity wing. Are you saying they're mistaken?" Her voice trembled slightly now. "I don't know why they'd say that. I've never been pregnant, never had a child. I wouldn't just abandon babies, that's insane." The tension thickened. "Ethan and..." Liam exchanged a glance. "Would you be willing to take a DNA test?" Liam asked calmly. Chloe looked taken aback. "To prove I'm not their mother?" "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "This is a serious investigation, and your name has come up more than once. We need to eliminate every possibility." Chloe hesitated. "Fine, I'll do it. I have nothing to hide. But this is surreal." As the detectives left her apartment, Ethan remained quiet until they reached the elevator. "She's either the best liar I've ever seen," he muttered, "or someone's setting her up." Liam nodded. "We'll know soon." "Enough. I've already arranged for the DNA test to be processed on priority. Shouldn't take more than 24 hours. Back at the precinct, the sample was handed off to forensics, and the file on Chloe was updated. While they waited, Ethan dug deeper into hospital records, searching for any mention of Chloe beyond that night. There was nothing. Not a single appointment, delivery record, or lab report tied to her name. Yet she had been there. And now 3 infants were without a mother. The following afternoon, the test results came in. Ethan opened the envelope slowly, scanning the document with practiced eyes. Then he placed it on the desk and leaned back. "Not the mother," he said flatly. "Zero biological connection, not even a partial match." Liam leaned in to verify. "So, either she's telling the truth, or someone went to extreme lengths to make her look involved." Ethan stood and began pacing. "There has to be a reason she was there that night. People don't just wander into a hospital wing reserved for VIP private births by accident. She said she was visiting a friend. What's the name?" Liam checked his notes. "Grace Mendel. Scheduled for gallbladder surgery that same day. Records. Check out. But Grace was in a different building. The West Wing is nowhere near general surgery." Ethan stopped pacing. So Chloe lied about why she was there. "Maybe she got lost," Liam offered, but his tone lacked conviction. "No one accidentally walks into a secured maternity floor," Ethan said. "She was there for something, or someone, and we need to find out who." Later that evening, the detectives returned to Chloe's apartment unannounced. She opened the door, looking wary. "Back so soon?" "We have the DNA results," Ethan said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You're not the mother. I told you that," she snapped. "So why am I still being treated like a suspect?" Liam remained calm. "Because you lied to us. Grace Mendel wasn't in the West Wing. She was on the opposite side of the hospital. So why were you near the maternity ward?" Chloe faltered. I wasn't. Sure, how to explain?" "Try," Ethan said firmly. She hesitated, biting her lip. "I was looking for someone, a man named Victor. He asked me to bring him something. Said he'd meet me near the elevators in that section. I didn't know it was maternity. He said it was important." Ethan and Liam went. "Still, Victor, who?" "I don't know his last name," she admitted. "We met through a friend of a friend. I barely know him, but he paid me." "Paid you to deliver what?" Liam asked. Chloe's voice dropped to a whisper. "A sealed envelope." They pressed for more, but Chloe shut down, refusing to give additional details without a lawyer present. Back at the station, Liam began digging into hospital security logs, cross-referencing badge swipes and elevator access from that night. One name popped up: Victor Langston, private donor, multiple visits to St. Mary's over the past 6 months, always after hours, never for treatment. Liam printed the access log and placed it on Ethan's desk. "I think we just found our next lead." Ethan scanned the paper. "He's connected to Chloe, might be connected to the babies. Or he's the reason they were left there in the first place," Liam added. "Either way, he's our link. We need to find him." Ethan nodded. "Let's get a warrant. I want eyes on him within the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, the mystery around Chloe deepened. Her involvement now seemed less like that of a suspect and more like that of a pawn, used, discarded, and left holding questions she couldn't answer. But one thing was now clear to the detectives. The abandoned babies weren't a mistake. They were part of something planned, and whoever planned it wasn't done yet. The next morning, Rachel returned to the neonatal unit and was updated about the DNA results. She exhaled slowly, but it didn't ease the tension in her chest. Chloe Rains, the woman everyone had silently suspected, was innocent. The babies remained in the same wing, guarded, monitored, and isolated from public view. Rachel stepped into the observation room, watching them sleep. Her thoughts wandered to the night they were found, the eeriness of that quiet room, the way they had been arranged, almost ceremoniously. None of it felt like abandonment. It felt like placement, as though they were being kept, stored, until someone could return, or until someone could collect them. She was pulled from her thoughts by a knock on the glass. Dr. Harris stepped in, handing her a printed copy of the forensics report. "You should see this," he said. Rachel scanned it and frowned. "No maternal match. But look here, there's a secondary flag." Harris nodded. "An anomaly. Someone tried to remove portions of the hospital's genetic database 2 days ago. They were caught mid-transfer. The lab team traced the intrusion to an external source. Off-site." Rachel's hand trembled. "Someone's trying to erase the baby's origin." The realization shifted everything. These babies weren't just abandoned. They were hidden. And now, someone was trying to make sure no one ever knew where they came from. Chloe had been used as a distraction, a scapegoat. Victor Langston's name was now on their radar, and whatever he had in that envelope might be the key. But for now, they had more questions than answers. And 3 infants, whose existence had already become a threat to someone powerful enough to manipulate hospital systems and erase identities. As Rachel looked at the babies once more, a single thought echoed in her mind. Whoever was behind this wasn't trying to run from the truth. They were trying to bury it. "We're here to speak with Marina Blake," Ethan said firmly, as he flashed his badge to the receptionist at the private psychiatric clinic nestled on the outskirts of the city. The young woman behind the desk nodded quickly, typing a few keys before motioning toward the hallway. "Room 214, she's been cooperative, quiet, but lucid." Liam followed Ethan down the corridor, both men silent until they reached the room. Inside, Marina Blake sat by the window, dressed in a pale blue blouse and soft gray slacks, her dark hair pinned back neatly. She turned as they entered, her eyes alert, her posture calm. Perhaps too calm. "Detectives," she greeted with a faint smile. You're not the first visitors I've had with questions. Ethan took the seat across from her, opening his notepad. We're here about the night of your delivery. Records show you gave birth at St. Mary's 3 nights ago, but there are inconsistencies. Marina's smile faded slightly, and her hands folded tightly in her lap. Yes, I was told my children were stillborn. All 3. Liam raised an eyebrow. That's unusual, isn't it? 3 at once, and no opportunity to see the bodies. Marina's voice dropped. They said it. Wasn't advisable. Ethan leaned in slightly, watching her face. Marina, did you ever hold them? Were you ever shown confirmation? Photos, medical explanations? Her eyes flicked to the window for a moment, then back. No, I was under anesthesia for the cesarean. When I woke up, they told me they didn't survive. I asked to see them, but the nurse said they'd already been transferred to the morgue for examination. I was grieving, numb. I didn't push. Liam scribbled a note and looked at Ethan, who continued. Do you remember who performed the surgery? Marina shook her head slowly. No, that's part of the problem. I never saw the doctor. I was admitted under emergency conditions, but everything was impersonal, cold. They kept saying things like standard protocol and no need for concern, and then suddenly I'm waking up to a nurse telling me they're gone. She paused, her fingers trembling slightly. I didn't even get to name them. Ethan studied her. Did you sign any consent forms, authorize procedures, anything like that? There was a clipboard, a lot of jargon. I signed, but I didn't read it all. I was in pain, scared, alone. Liam set down his notepad and spoke. Gently. Marina, what if I told you that 3 unidentified newborns were found in that same hospital the night you gave birth? 3 babies, healthy, abandoned with no mother on record. Her eyes widened instantly, the blood draining from her face. What are you saying? She whispered. We can't be sure yet, Ethan said cautiously. But the timeline matches, the location matches, and based on preliminary data, the physical characteristics of the babies align with what your records suggest. Triplets, full term, no complications during pregnancy. Marina stood abruptly, taking a step back, her hand pressed against her chest. No, that can't be. They told me. They were dead. I cried for them. I mourned them. Liam stood too, slowly. We're asking because there's a chance you were lied to. And if you were, we need to know who orchestrated it and why. Would you be willing to take a DNA test? Marina looked at both men, her voice barely audible. If they're mine, if there's even a chance, I need to know. I need to see them. Ethan nodded. We'll arrange that, but understand, this could get very complicated. Marina sat down again, slower this time, her whole body trembling. Why would someone do this? She asked, her voice cracking. Why take them away from me and then lie about their deaths? Ethan exchanged a glance with Liam before answering. That's exactly what we're trying to find out. But there's something else. The doctor listed on your chart. There's no official record of him ever working at St. Mary's. The name doesn't exist in the hospital database, not even in the emergency backup logs. Marina's brows furrowed. But he was the one who approved my surgery. His signature was on the forms. Forged or real, we don't know yet, Liam said. But this wasn't a clerical error. It was deliberate. Marina's mind raced, her memories of that night now a haze of panic, bright lights, voices behind masks. There was a nurse, she said suddenly. Red hair, late 40s. She held my hand before the anesthesia kicked in. She said something about protocols being different for special cases. At the time, I thought she meant because of the triplets. Now I don't know. Ethan jotted the detail down. That's helpful. We'll track her. Every detail you give helps us piece this together. They spent another hour with her, going over every recollection she could muster. From the admitting process to the waiting room staff, even the orderly who wheeled her to surgery, everything seemed off in hindsight. Names were vague, explanations generic. Nothing felt anchored in reality. Marina mentioned that no one called her family, even though she'd listed her sister as her emergency contact. That struck Ethan and Liam as deliberate isolation, classic manipulation. Liam's theory was already forming. Someone wanted Marina alone, uninformed, and emotionally overwhelmed. A perfect target. When they finally stood to leave, Marina followed them to the door. "If you find out they're mine," she said, her voice firmer now, "I want them back, no matter what it takes." Ethan nodded. "That's our goal. But we're up against something carefully planned. People with resources. We'll keep you informed, step by step." As they left the clinic, Liam murmured, "You believe her?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Every word. She's not lying. She was a victim. And those kids, they were stolen." Back at the station, they handed Marina's DNA sample to the lab and began digging deeper into the hospital's staff lists. Ethan flagged several inconsistencies from that night. Nurses whose schedules were suddenly cleared, a janitor who never clocked in or out, missing log entries. Someone had manipulated the system from the inside. The question was, who had the power and the motive to do that? Meanwhile, Rachel and Dr. Harris, upon hearing about Marina's interview, began reviewing the neonatal logs again. "Her story lines up with the time gaps," Rachel said, scrolling through the registry. 3 blank entries, time-stamped within an hour of the birth. Harris pointed at a name scribbled hastily in the margin. Dr. S. Lawrence. That's the same name. From Marina's form. And he doesn't exist. Rachel's hands gripped the edge of the desk. They took her babies and lied to her. This isn't just negligence. This is human trafficking. Or something even worse. Harris nodded grimly. And if that's true, we've only scratched the surface. This goes beyond our hospital. The implications now spread far wider than one woman's trauma. A hidden system, intentional falsifications, and children moved like property. And somewhere in the middle, Marina Blake had unknowingly become a key. By the end of the day, the lab called with an update. Preliminary results showed a 99.9% maternal match between Marina and the 3 infants. Ethan and Liam stood in stunned silence, the paper still warm from the printer in Ethan's hand. "They're hers," he whispered. Liam swallowed hard. "We have to tell her." But Ethan held the paper tighter, a new thought gnawing at the edges of his mind. Someone knew this would come out, and they tried to bury it anyway. That means they're not afraid of being exposed. That means they have protection, influence. We need to find out who they are before they try to make this disappear again. The truth was no longer just shocking. It was dangerous. And now that Marina knew her children were alive, there was no going back. Her grief had just become a fight, and the people behind this were not prepared for a mother ready to reclaim what had been stolen. "That's impossible," Rachel said, her voice sharp as she stared at the screen in front of her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for just a second before she clicked back through the hospital's birth records for the night Marina Blake had supposedly lost her children. "There's no entry under her patient ID," she muttered, eyes narrowing. Dr. Harris leaned in beside her, the dim light of the administrative archive room illuminating the deep lines on his forehead. "Check the emergency intake forms. She came in under acute distress. There has to be something in triage." Rachel nodded and opened the alternate database. After a moment, a fragmented entry popped up. No timestamp, no attending physician, just a generic note. "Caesarean delivery performed due to fetal distress." She looked at Harris. "This isn't standard. There's no surgical team listed, no anesthesiologist, not even a nurse's signature. It's like the entire procedure happened in a vacuum." Harris rubbed his chin. Either someone erased the records, or they never documented them properly to begin with. But either way, this is beyond negligent. It's calculated. Rachel's stomach twisted. And whoever did, this knew the system well enough to make it disappear. Rachel clicked into the audit log, the system's behind-the-scenes tracker of who accessed what file and when. Every time a medical record was opened, modified, or created, the system recorded a digital fingerprint. It took only a minute to filter by the date of Marina's delivery, and another to isolate the user who accessed her record during the early hours of the morning. One ID appeared again and again. Slorens, 85. "That name again," Rachel whispered. "S. Lawrence, same one listed on her consent forms." Harris stiffened. "I've worked here for 27 years. I know every doctor who's ever stepped foot in this building. That's not one of them." Rachel dug deeper, running the ID through the hospital's staff directory. No results. Then through the payroll system. Nothing. Finally, she tried the National Medical License database. Still nothing. "He doesn't exist," she said flatly. At least not officially. There is no licensed physician by that name practicing in this state. Harris crossed his arms. Yet he performed major surgery on a woman under our roof, delivered 3 healthy babies, and left no trace. That's not just illegal. It's surgical-level erasure. They printed every document connected to the ID and laid them out across the conference table in Harris's office. Rachel paced back and forth, piecing together the fragments like a puzzle missing half the image. "Look here," she said, pointing at a form. This was supposedly signed by Dr. S. Lawrence at 03:04 a.m., but 2 minutes later, the same ID accessed an unrelated file, an appendectomy case from 6 months ago. Why would someone toggle between an emergency birth and a closed surgical file from months ago in the middle of a procedure? Harris frowned. Diversion. They were covering their trail in real time, accessing unrelated records to muddle the log. Anyone auditing this would see overlapping activities and assume system malfunction. Rachel's voice was tight. It worked, until now. Harris picked up one of the forms and squinted at the signature. Doesn't match anything I've seen. It's stylized, almost theatrical, like it was made to look official without being legible. Rachel grabbed her phone. I'm sending this to handwriting analysis. If it's forged, we'll know. Harris nodded, his tone grim. But forged or not, we still don't know who this person is, or how they got access to perform a surgery here without being caught. They returned to the administration server and cross-checked badge entries, surgical room access logs, and camera records from that night. Operating room B7 was logged as under maintenance, Rachel read aloud. But the motion sensor shows entry at 02:59 a.m. and exit at 04:13 a.m. That's exactly the window Marina would have been in surgery. Harris tapped the screen. Who entered? Badge number 44872. But that badge belongs to Dr. Lena Markov, and she was logged in at a medical conference in Chicago that entire week. Harris muttered a curse. Stolen credentials. That's how they got in. They used her ID to access the OR without triggering alarms. Rachel pulled up the camera outside B7, but the footage cut out 10 minutes before the entry log. Camera failure, she said. Or tampering. Either way, someone planned this. They knew which systems to disable, which records to edit, which names to fake. This isn't the work of a desperate parent or rogue nurse. This is organized. Harris's voice dropped. Which means this hospital has a leak, and we're dealing with someone inside, or someone who had help from the inside. That's the only way this operation could have run this cleanly. As they dug further into cross-department communication logs, Rachel found a flagged message from 3 days before Marina's admittance. It was a system-wide internal memo marked confidential, requesting that all staff with late-night shifts submit their badge credentials to IT for system calibration. That's not standard, she said. Harris looked over her shoulder. Not even close. We don't mass collect credentials without encryption. Rachel opened the sender field. It was routed through an internal account belonging to a now terminated employee, one who had left 6 months prior after a data breach. So they used a dead account, she muttered. They collected badge data under false pretenses, planted a ghost ID into the staff list, and walked in like they belonged. Harris sat down slowly. My God, this wasn't just cover-up. It was infiltration. We have to report this to the board. Now. Rachel hesitated. And say what? That someone's running a black market birthing operation out of our ORs? That we let a fake doctor cut into a mother and steal her babies? Harris didn't flinch. Yes, because that's exactly what happened. And if we don't act fast, those children won't be the last. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Rachel couldn't shake the unease. She sat at her kitchen table, papers spread in front of her, replaying every detail. The timeline was airtight. Marina's procedure had been real. The babies had been born, and someone had gone to great lengths to erase that reality from existence. Her phone buzzed. A text from the lab. The handwriting on the forms was a match to 3 other forged documents tied to 2 infant disappearances in nearby hospitals. Rachel stared at the screen. It's bigger than St. Mary's, she whispered. The implications were suffocating. This wasn't a one-time incident. This was a system, a network, a machine that harvested lives under surgical lights, then wiped away the blood with falsified charts and ghost signatures. She reached for her phone and dialed Harris. "We have a pattern," she said when he answered. "Same fake name, same style, same MO. Harris didn't respond right away. Then quietly, "They're not just stealing babies. They're erasing mothers. And if we don't stop this now, we're going to lose more than just a few files. We're going to lose lives." The next morning, they scheduled an emergency meeting with hospital security and administration. The room was tense, filled with guarded faces and clipped responses. Rachel presented the timeline, the data, breach, the ghost credentials, the falsified records. Some attendees looked shocked, others didn't. Harris watched them closely. "We need full access to the server backups, personnel communications, and security archives from the past year. No restrictions." The head of IT hesitated. "That could expose sensitive donor information." "We don't care about donors," Harris interrupted sharply. "We care about criminal activity inside this hospital. And right now, someone used our facility to perform an unauthorized delivery, erase the patient's memory of her children, and smuggle them out under false credentials. That's not a leak. That's an invasion." The room fell quiet. Rachel added, "And there's more. We believe this S. Lauren's identity has been used in at least 3 hospitals in the state. We're looking at coordinated efforts. This isn't just about Marina. She's one of many." The silence lingered. Finally, the administrator nodded. "You'll get what you need. Discreetly. We don't want panic." Rachel met Harris's eyes. The panic had already begun, just not where they were willing to admit. As they left the meeting, Rachel felt the weight of every unanswered question pressing against her ribs. "If this Lawrence isn't real," she asked, "who's behind the name? Someone has to be benefiting from this." Harris gave her a look that was both grim and resigned. "Whoever it is, they've been doing it for years, perfecting it, testing weaknesses. And now that we've seen the cracks, they'll either run or strike harder." Rachel paused at the door to her office. "What if they already know we're looking?" Harris didn't answer immediately. Then with a slow nod, he said, "Then we better be ready. Because this isn't just about babies anymore. This is about control, about power. And someone just realized we're not blind anymore." "Marina Blake!" a nurse called from the hallway, clipboard in hand, glancing into the small room where Marina sat, legs tightly crossed, fingers twisting the strap of her purse. Marina stood immediately. "Yes, I'm here," she replied, her voice firm despite the knot in her chest. She followed the eyed nurse down a narrow corridor of the precinct's partnered medical lab, her footsteps steady, though her mind raced. The DNA test was a formality now. She already knew. She felt it in her bones. Those children were hers, stolen from her by a system designed to keep her confused, sedated, and silent. The nurse ushered her into the exam room, where a technician awaited with sterile gloves and a small kit. "We'll just do a quick cheek swab," he explained gently. "Shouldn't take more than a few seconds." Marina nodded and sat in the chair. The technician worked swiftly and efficiently, sealing the swab into a labeled envelope. As she rose to leave, the technician smiled sympathetically. "You're very brave," he said quietly. Marina managed a nod, but her chest ached. Outside, Detective Liam Brooks was waiting. "You okay?" he asked. "I did it," she replied. "And now we wait." Back in her apartment later that afternoon, Marina sat at the kitchen table, her phone face down beside a half-empty mug of tea that had long gone cold. She had barely eaten all day, her stomach twisted in anticipation. Every knock on the door, every buzz of her phone, made her nerves jolt. She didn't know what to expect, only that everything was changing. She had gone from grieving mother to potential victim of a conspiracy, and now perhaps to a witness in something much larger. Her phone vibrated once. She stared at the screen. An unknown number. Her throat tightened. Against her better judgment, she answered. There was a pause, a breath, and then a male voice, low and chilling, came through. "Stop looking, or you'll lose them again." The line went dead. Marina stared at the phone, her hand frozen mid-air, the device still pressed to her ear. Her body went cold, not with confusion, but with a terrifying clarity. Someone knew she was getting closer. Someone was watching. And now, they had spoken. She took a long, shaky breath and immediately dialed Liam's number, her fingers barely able to hit the right buttons. "She got a call?" Ethan asked, his voice tense as he strode into the Precinct's meeting room minutes later. Liam nodded, phone still in hand. Untraceable, spoofed number, voice disguised. She's rattled but holding it together. Ethan paced. What exactly did they say? Stop looking, or you'll lose them again. Ethan exhaled sharply. It's not just a threat. It's a confirmation. They know she's connected to the kids. They wouldn't say that if she were just a nuisance. Liam agreed. They're monitoring her, watching us. Someone on the inside is feeding them updates. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He stared at the whiteboard, still covered in timelines. Printouts, photos of the babies, Marina's file, and Rachel's recent findings. Then he turned. We escalate. Full protection detail for Marina. She doesn't go anywhere alone. And we start reviewing staff. I want background checks rerun. Every nurse, every doctor, every janitor who was on duty that week. Someone's feeding them. Liam picked up the phone again. I'll have her placed under watch within the hour. Ethan added, and sweep her apartment, top to bottom. If they've planted something, I want it found. No more blind spots. Marina opened the door to find two plainclothes officers. Standing on the landing, badges already out. Ma'am, we're here on Detective Brooks's orders, one said. We'll be staying outside your door for now and rotating shifts throughout the night. She nodded, stepping back to let them survey the space. The younger of the two officers, a woman in her early 30s, entered and began checking windows, closets, and vents. The other remained by the front door, one hand near his holstered sidearm. Marina watched them work in silence. When the female officer passed by her, she spoke gently. They'll try to scare you, she said, but they don't want exposure. They want you to run, to shut up. That's how these people operate. Marina met her gaze. I'm not running. I want my children back. The officer nodded and moved on. In her bedroom, Marina sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in hand, scrolling through photos she never thought she'd be. Revisiting ultrasounds, maternity appointments, blurry images of her swollen belly she'd once taken half-heartedly. Now they were evidence, proof of what she had lived, proof that she wasn't delusional. Someone had stolen her children, and now someone wanted her silent. Rachel met Ethan outside, the neonatal ward early the next morning, her face drawn and pale from a sleepless night. She's not safe, Rachel said before he even spoke. I know, Ethan replied. We've got officers posted outside her door. They're sweeping the building today. We'll find how the call got through. Rachel hesitated. What if it wasn't just a threat? What if they're already planning something worse? Ethan glanced toward the viewing window, where the three babies slept in their cribs, each one monitored and protected. Then we stay ahead of them, he said. We track every visitor, every staff member, every camera angle, no more assumptions. Rachel nodded slowly, then added, There's something else. I found a message in the system, an auto-deleted note embedded in Marina's intake file. It triggered the moment we ran her DNA. Ethan's brow furrowed. What kind of message? Just a phrase, Rachel answered. Protocol S9, confirm maternal compromise. Ethan stared at her. That's not medical language. That's operational. Someone programmed a trigger into her file. The moment we linked her DNA, they knew. That's why she got the call. It wasn't a coincidence. Liam returned to the precinct with news from tech. We've got the source of the threat call. It wasn't a random spoof. It originated from a secondary line routed through the hospital's internal VoIP system. That means it came from inside. Ethan's jaw tightened. So someone inside the hospital made the call, using internal access. They didn't even bother with a burner. Liam nodded. Either they're getting sloppy, or they're confident we won't catch them. Ethan looked back at the whiteboard. We need to flip that confidence on its head. Start with employees who had access to VoIP credentials. IT, administrative, staff, shift supervisors. Liam added. And Rachel's right. Whoever wrote that S9 protocol line, they weren't just deleting records. They built a surveillance trigger, which means they planned for Marina to be found, or at least suspected it was possible. Ethan rubbed his temple, trying to connect dots that still felt disjointed. They're always one step ahead. We need someone who can match that, someone who knows how to think like them. Liam raised an eyebrow. You thinking what I'm thinking? Ethan's expression darkened. Yeah, it's time we brought in someone off books. By early evening, Marina sat on her couch, flanked by two officers who barely spoke, their eyes always scanning. A knock at the door made her heart leap. One of the officers opened it cautiously. Rachel stepped inside, holding a file. "We got confirmation," she said softly, kneeling beside Marina. "The DNA is conclusive. All three are yours." Marina covered her mouth, eyes flooding with tears. "They're mine," she whispered. "They're really mine." Rachel nodded. "And we're going to make sure no one takes them from you again." Marina closed her eyes, letting the truth sink in. The fear was still there. Yes, but it had something to fight against now. Certainty. For the first time since the night of the surgery, since she had woken up to silence and lies, she had proof. Her babies were alive, and they were waiting for her. "What do I do now?" she asked. Rachel squeezed her hand. "You stay protected. You follow every instruction, and when we tell you to run, you run. But until then, you stay strong." Marina nodded. She would, because now it wasn't just grief. It was a mission, and no threat, no voice on a phone, was going to stop her. "They're hers," Ethan said, placing the lab report on the table between Rachel and Liam. "Confirmed. All three. Genetic match with Marina Blake. 99.9% certainty." Rachel let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her fingers brushed the edge of the document as if afraid it might disappear. "So it's over," she said softly. "At least the doubt is. We know now. They're her children. They were never dead. They were stolen." Liam leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, staring at the ceiling. "It's not over," he said. "It's only just starting. This confirmation? It makes Marina more dangerous to them than ever. They're going to retaliate, one way or another." Ethan nodded. "I want Marina moved to a safe house. We'll coordinate with child services to keep the babies protected. But from this point forward, every person involved in exposing this is a target. That includes you, Rachel." She looked up, surprised. "Me? Your name's in the original report. You found the babies. You're the one who connected the hospital's records with Marina's story. You're visible. They know who you are now, which means you need to be alert. From this point on, you don't move alone." Rachel tried to focus on her shift at the hospital later that day, but the tension was mounting. Every unfamiliar face in the hallway, every door that didn't close properly, every minor system error sent her into a quiet panic. She reviewed the neonatal unit security log 3 times before feeling confident the access points were still sealed. Yet even as she stood at the observation window watching the 3 babies sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When her shift ended just after 10 p.m., she took the back elevator down to the staff parking lot and walked briskly to her car. That's when she saw it. A black sedan parked at the far edge of the lot, engine running, windows tinted too dark to see inside. She paused. The car didn't move, but it also didn't belong to any staff member she recognized. Rachel got into her car, locked the doors, and turned on the engine. As she pulled out, the black sedan shifted into gear and followed at a distance. Not fast, not close, just enough to let her know they were watching. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove directly to the precinct. "Third time this week," Liam said as Rachel recounted what had happened in the parking lot. "Same car?" She nodded. "I can't see who's inside, but it's the same model, same plates. They know where I work. They're waiting." Ethan stepped in, his expression unreadable. "We'll assign someone to your building. You don't drive anywhere alone, you. Don't use the same route twice, and you call us the moment anything looks off." "Understood." Rachel's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she crossed her arms. "I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted to help those babies. I didn't think it would make me a target." Ethan looked her in the eye. "That's exactly why you're a target. Because you cared. Because you acted. These people, they don't operate in the open. They depend on silence, on confusion. You disrupted that." Liam added, "They want to scare you into stepping away. Don't let them." Rachel nodded, exhaling slowly. "I won't." Ethan handed her a phone. "New number, secure line. Only a few people have it. Use this for everything." She took it without hesitation. Whatever fear she felt now had hardened into something else. Resolve. Meanwhile, Marina was relocated to a secured apartment complex used by law enforcement to protect high-risk witnesses. 2 officers remained on site at all times. The babies were transported separately to a pediatric facility under police surveillance, where Rachel insisted on being present during every medical evaluation. They should be with her, Rachel told Ethan. Even if it's just an hour a day, they need to bond. Ethan agreed, but logistics were difficult. The more visible Marina became, the greater the risk. While Rachel advocated for limited supervised reunions, Chloe Raines was nowhere to be found. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her apartment was locked, untouched. The neighbors hadn't seen her in 2 days. Ethan and Liam sent officers to canvass the area, checking cameras, store logs, street footage. Nothing. It was as if she had evaporated. She was scared, Liam said, but she wouldn't run without telling someone. Not now, not after everything. Ethan rubbed his jaw. Unless someone made her disappear. Liam looked up. Or killed her. The thought lingered like smoke between them. If Chloe was gone, it meant the net was tightening, and they were running out of time to stay ahead of it. Rachel sat beside one of the cribs, gently adjusting the blanket over one of the boys. Noah, she thought. They had started to recognize each child individually now, even before names were assigned officially. She had learned their habits, their cries, the way each of them responded to her voice. There was something in their gaze that haunted her, an unspoken weight, like they'd been born into a world already stacked against them. She had seen too many babies over the years, too many tragedies, but nothing like this. These three were symbols now, of what had been taken and what could still be lost. When the nurse entered with their feeding chart, Rachel asked without turning her head, "Any updates on Chloe?" The nurse hesitated. No one said anything, but one of the security guards mentioned the back door alarm to the west stairwell was disabled the night she vanished. Rachel stiffened. Disabled how? Manual override. Someone used an internal code. Rachel stood quickly. Get that information to Ethan. Now. She didn't wait for the reply. She already knew what it meant. Chloe hadn't just left. Someone had come for her, and that someone had clearance. Ethan stormed into the hospital's admin center an hour later, demanding full access to staff logs and override codes. The hospital's security chief reluctantly handed over the data, his face pale. "We thought it was a tech glitch," he said. The override was input manually at 02:14 a.m. It wasn't reported until the morning. Liam scanned the list. One code stood out. "This badge belongs to Dr. Victor Langston," he said quietly. Ethan's head shot up. He's not even staff anymore. He resigned months ago after a misconduct complaint. But his credentials weren't revoked, Liam muttered. Someone kept his access live. Ethan's expression darkened. "Find him. Now. I don't care if he's in another state. Pull his phone records, credit card activity, vehicle registration. He's connected to this." Rachel entered just in time to hear the name. "Langston?" she asked. "He's the one Chloe mentioned. The man she delivered the envelope to." Liam turned to her. "That's our link. He recruited Chloe. He was present the night Marina gave birth, and now Chloe's gone." Ethan nodded once, and the babies were his objective all along. Later that evening, alone in the hospital break room, Rachel stared at the now empty mug in her hands, the image of the black car. Flashing in her mind again, she knew the threat wasn't over. It had only escalated. Chloe's disappearance was a message, a warning, and maybe a punishment. But Rachel also knew that giving in to fear wasn't an option. She looked down at her phone, scrolling through the photos she had secretly taken of the three babies. Each one had Marina's features in some way: the eyes, the chin, the shape of their tiny fingers. No amount of forged documents or stolen credentials could rewrite that truth. And if Rachel had to be watched, followed, even threatened to protect them, so be it. She stood back to the neonatal unit and requested to be placed on double shifts. When the attending nurse asked why, she answered without hesitation, "Because someone has to be here when they come again, and when they do, I'll be ready." "Run that again," Ethan ordered, leaning over the analyst's shoulder as the waveform of the intercepted call played on the monitor. The room was tight, tucked in the back of the precinct, accessible only to the cybercrime division. Liam stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen. The sigh. Voice that came through was unmistakably male, smooth, measured, but cold. We need to handle this before it escalates. The woman is cracking, and those children are not supposed to exist anymore. If the lab confirms maternity, we resolve the problem. Permanently. The analyst clicked pause, isolating the voice. We ran a voice print comparison through our federal database, she said. Cross-checked with previous recordings from public interviews, press conferences, even shareholder meetings. There's a match. She clicked a file, and a photo appeared on screen. Ethan's jaw tensed. Victor Langston, Liam exhaled. That explains everything. Victor wasn't just a name in a file. He was one of the city's most influential businessmen, with ties to biotech, private hospitals, and several so-called philanthropic foundations. Publicly untouchable. Privately now, a suspect. And the money trail would be the next proof. The analyst didn't even wait for a prompt. You'll want to see this. She pulled up a screen showing a series of encrypted financial transactions routed through dummy corporations and shell accounts. We decrypted a set of internal transfers linked to Chloe. Rain's personal bank account. 2 payments made 1 week apart. Both routed through a company registered under Langston's holding group. The notes classify them as consulting services. Liam scoffed. Consulting! That's what they're calling blackmail and courier jobs now. Rachel, standing near, the doorway, took a step forward. That's when she delivered the envelope. The timeline fits. The analyst nodded. And it gets worse. One of the transfers was made the same day Chloe's apartment was broken into. The security footage was wiped clean, but the timestamp matches. Ethan paced the room, processing it all. So Chloe was working for him, maybe unwillingly. Maybe she got in too deep and tried to back out. Liam added, and Langston couldn't risk that. If she flipped, it would connect him to the stolen babies, the false records, everything. Rachel asked the obvious question. Do we think he had her killed? No one answered immediately. Then Ethan said, if she's not dead, she's being held somewhere. And either way, Langston's behind it. They spent the next hour building a timeline. Each transaction, phone call, and appearance by Victor Langston in or near the hospital grounds was logged. His badge access had been deactivated months prior, yet the override code used during Chloe's disappearance traced back to an administrator who once served on Langston's private foundation board. Everywhere we look, he's there, Liam muttered. But never directly. Always a layer of insulation, Ethan pointed to the board. But not anymore. That voice recording is damning. And if we can tie him to Chloe's disappearance, we've got enough for an indictment. Rachel leaned forward. You're not seriously thinking the justice system will touch him, are you? Langston owns half the city. He funds police departments, university hospitals. Hell, he has dinner with judges. Ethan didn't flinch. We're not going through the front door. We build the case, quietly. When we hit, it has to be airtight. Liam turned back to the screen. We need to know what he's planning next. If Chloe knew too much, she wasn't the only one. Rachel thought aloud. Then we need to find the envelope, what she gave him. It's the missing piece. Ethan made the call to activate surveillance on Victor Langston. Unmarked cars began rotating near his estate, a modern fortress hidden behind manicured walls and security drones. The man himself, however, remained invisible. No public appearances, no press statements, and no digital footprint in the past 48 hours. That's unusual for him, Liam said during the next briefing. He loves being seen. The fact that he's hiding tells us he knows. We're closing in, Rachel interjected. We need someone inside, someone who's worked for him, a former employee, anyone who can testify. The suggestion sparked a flurry of action. A search through past employee records from Langston's biotech subsidiary revealed several names, but one stood out. Vanessa Lee, a former lab technician who filed a whistleblower complaint 2 years prior that was quietly buried. Find her, Ethan ordered, and fast. Meanwhile, Marina remained under protection. She had been briefed on Langston's suspected involvement, and though visibly shaken, her resolve was stronger than ever. If he took Chloe, he can take anyone, she said. But he won't take them again. Not my children. Her words were no longer the cries of a grieving mother. They were a vow. By mid-afternoon, the cybercrime analyst returned with another discovery. You're going to want to see this, she said, pulling up a secured recording from a private security firm that serviced one of Langston's lesser-known research facilities. The footage showed Chloe entering the building 2 nights before she disappeared. She was carrying a folder, her face drawn and pale. She spoke briefly to a man at the desk. No audio, but her body language showed hesitation, urgency. 22 minutes later, she left empty-handed. She delivered something, Liam said. And it wasn't just an envelope this time. It was documents. Records, maybe. Rachel's eyes didn't leave the screen. If we find that folder, we find the truth, Ethan agreed. We need a warrant. That facility is our next target. But getting a warrant against a place under Langston's umbrella wouldn't be easy. We'll need to go federal, Ethan concluded. If we can convince the U.S. Attorney's Office that this is interstate trafficking, they'll override local protections. Langston's reach might be long, but it's not invincible, Rachel added. Then we move. Because every second we waste, those babies remain under threat. The same night, Rachel was leaving the hospital after checking on the triplets when she noticed the black car again. Same model, same license plate. This time, it was parked across from her building, half hidden under the shadow of a tree. She didn't panic. She didn't even slow down. Instead, she pulled out her secure phone and called Liam. They're watching me again, she said. Same car. I'm Pau. Heading to Marina's safe house. I don't want to lead them home. Liam confirmed he was already nearby and would follow her route. 20 minutes later, they met at a gas station and swapped vehicles. Liam took Rachel's car and continued toward her apartment as bait. Rachel rode with the officer, assigned to Marina's detail. They're escalating, she said quietly. Langston knows we're getting close. The officer nodded. And he's desperate. That's when they're most dangerous. Rachel looked out the window, her voice low but firm. Let them come. I'm done being scared. We know who it is now. He may have the power, but we have the truth. And for the first time in days, she believed it. Inside the secure unit, Marina was finally allowed a supervised moment with her children. The triplets were brought in one by one, and as she held them, first Noah, then Eli, then little Ava, her entire body trembled. You're real, she whispered to each of them. You're alive. The officer nearby turned away, giving her a measure of privacy. Rachel entered minutes later, and the 2 women exchanged a look that needed no words. Marina's tears streamed silently as she held all 3 babies close, the stolen months of grief now replaced with fragile, powerful hope. They're beautiful, Rachel said. They're perfect. Marina smiled through her tears. And they're mine. No matter what he tries, no matter what happens, he can't undo this. Rachel nodded. He's going to try, but we're going to stop him. The weight of the fight ahead remained, but in that moment, surrounded by the fragile heartbeat of reunion, it didn't feel impossible. Langston had the reach, but they had the truth, and with it, they were going to bring down the man who thought he could bury lives in silence and money. His name had finally surfaced, and now there would be no hiding. Your Honor, we are filing an emergency petition for full maternal custody, the attorney said, placing a thick folder on the judge's desk. Marina sat beside her, hands clenched tightly in her lap, her heart thudding with equal parts fear and defiance. The courtroom was modest, filled with plain benches and a quiet air of procedure, but to Marina, it felt like the front line of a war. The state had temporary protective custody of the triplets, citing the unresolved criminal investigation and safety concerns. But now that the DNA had confirmed her maternity, and with new evidence of medical fraud and conspiracy, her legal team was fighting to reunite her with her children. The opposing attorney, hired through a vague corporate proxy, barely concealed the disdain in his voice. Your Honor, with all due respect, this woman was told her children were deceased. She made no attempt to claim them until a police investigation happened to connect the dots. There are still unresolved questions about her mental fitness. Marina's attorney shot up. Objection. She was lied to. She was sedated, manipulated, and her records were falsified. She is a victim of an organized crime ring, and she's here to reclaim what is rightfully hers. The judge raised a hand to quiet both sides. This is a custody hearing, not a criminal trial, he said, looking down at the documents before him. However, I will hear testimony relevant to the children's welfare and maternal claim. Rachel was the first to be called. She stood tall as she approached the bench, her hospital badge still clipped to her coat pocket. The opposing lawyer wasted no time. Miss Foster, are you currently under any kind of police protection due to this case? Rachel answered clearly. Yes. So you acknowledge the situation is dangerous, even life-threatening. I acknowledge that criminals are trying to cover up what they did. That doesn't reflect on Marina. It reflects on the people who tried to destroy her life. He leaned forward. And yet you encouraged contact between this woman and the children. Yes, because I was present at their birth. I saw their conditions. I reviewed their falsified records, and I followed the evidence. They are her children, and she deserves to be their mother again. The room was silent for a beat. The judge nodded. Thank you, Miss Foster. You may step down. Dr. Harris followed. The veteran physician adjusted his glasses as he approached the witness stand, his face calm but steely. Dr. Harris, can you confirm your professional involvement with the case? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. I was on staff at St. Mary's Hospital the night Marina Blake gave birth. I oversaw part of the shift and was directly involved in reviewing her post-operative condition. The judge nodded. The opposing lawyer stood. Doctor, why didn't you intervene when Marina was told her children had died? Because I was denied access, Harris answered flatly. Her case was classified as a private birth under special authorization. When I attempted to review her file, I was locked out of the system. My credentials were overridden. Later, I discovered the physician of record, Dr. S. Lawrence, does not exist. The lawyer tried to push. And yet, you did nothing? Harris raised his voice. Because I didn't know what had been done until it was too late. I've spent every moment since working to uncover the truth, and I stand here today to tell you, this woman was robbed of her children, of her dignity, and of her right to raise her family. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. The steps, cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. Marina emerged flanked by her lawyer and 2 officers. Her face was composed, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. One reporter shouted, Marina, do you believe this case will restore your custody? Another asked, do you think someone at St. Mary's intentionally deceived you? Rachel and Harris shielded her, but Marina paused, turning toward the cameras. Yes, she said clearly. I believe my children were taken from me. And yes, I believe people are trying to stop me from getting them back. But I'm not afraid of them anymore. I'm a mother, and I'm going to fight like one. Her voice rang out louder than she'd expected, and the crowd quieted, surprised by her poise. That clip would be on every news broadcast by nightfall. Marina didn't care. She wanted the world to know she was no longer a grieving woman locked away in silence. She was here to claim her place, and if she had to fight a system built to silence her, so be it. Every lie was unraveling, and now her voice, once buried under sedation and falsified charts, was finally being heard. In an office high above the city, Victor Langston slammed a glass against the wall, shattering it in an explosion of fury. His assistant stood frozen near the door, unsure whether to move or speak. Victor turned toward a monitor showing news coverage of Marina's statement. She was supposed to be broken, he growled. They were all supposed to be buried under red tape and sealed files. He walked to his desk and hit a button. A call connected immediately. We need to fix this. Now. The voice on the other end was calm. Define fix. The mother, Victor snapped. She's giving interviews. She's walking into courtrooms like a martyr. That ends today. I want her silenced, discredited, ruined, whatever it takes. The voice responded without hesitation. Understood, but if we move too fast it might backfire. The public is watching now. Victor's eyes narrowed. Then make it look like something else. An accident, a scandal, a breakdown. I don't care how you do it. Just end this. The call ended. He paced in silence for a long moment before muttering to himself. She should have stayed quiet. She should have just grieved and disappeared. Back at the precinct, Ethan and Liam reviewed the footage from the courthouse and matched it with surveillance from Langston's known associates. One familiar face appeared among the crowd. Victor's head of private security, a man named Elias Moore. Why is he tailing a courthouse hearing? Liam asked. Because they're planning something, Ethan said. Langston doesn't let things spiral out of control unless he has a backup plan. He's watching, plotting. Rachel entered the room with another update. Media coverage is working in our favor. Several former staff from Langston's hospital contracts have reached out anonymously. They're scared, but they're talking. Ethan looked up. We need their names. If we can build a case big enough, Federal will step in. Rachel nodded. We're close, but we need to protect Marina. If Langston really wants her gone, we're running out of time. Ethan turned to Liam. Double her security. No movement without a team. If she sneezes, I want it logged. Langston just declared. War. Liam didn't blink. Then let's show him what it looks like when someone fights back with nothing to lose. That night, Marina sat by herself in the safe house, a photo of the triplets in her lap. She thought about the words she'd said on those courthouse steps, the weight of them, the danger they now brought. And she didn't regret a single syllable. Her entire life had been rewritten against her will, by a hospital that saw her as a chart, by a man who thought he could steal her motherhood, and by a world that wanted her silent. But she'd survived all of it. Now, the only thing left was to win. She placed the photo on the nightstand, stood, and walked to the window. A security officer stood outside, alert. Another paced the hallway. She was protected, but not safe. Not yet. Still, her resolve had only grown. You're not taking them, she whispered to the night, not out of fear, but as a vow. You're not taking me. Tomorrow would bring more court hearings, more press, more attacks. But she would be ready, because she was no longer waiting for justice. She was demanding it, and this time, she wouldn't stop. He disappeared, Rachel said, dropping the patient file onto the hospital conference table, her face tense and her eyes sharp with urgency. Nurse Daniel Costa. He was on night shifts in the neonatal wing. He came to me 2 nights ago, said he had proof, documents, emails, audio recordings, that linked 2 doctors to the baby trafficking scheme. He was scared but determined. He told me he just needed a bit more time to organize everything and he'd meet me after his shift. He never showed up. Ethan looked immediately to Liam, who was already unlocking his phone. When was the last time anyone saw him? Rachel answered quickly. 2 days ago. He clocked out of his shift and told a colleague he was going home to retrieve the rest of the files. His parents said he never made it home. He hasn't answered texts or calls, and his apartment was found locked from the outside. No signs of struggle, but nothing inside was touched. Ethan pulled a sheet from Daniel's employee file. What was his connection exactly? According to him, he overheard conversations between Dr. Luciano Freitas and Dr. Helena Montero. Both have high-level clearance and regular access to restricted areas. He said they weren't just aware of the scheme, they were managing part of it. Liam scrolled rapidly through Daniel's call records provided by the telecom division. Last outgoing call was to Rachel. Time-stamped 2 hours before his disappearance. No calls after. Then there's this. He called an unknown number 5 times in the last week. Same number that pinged off a tower near Langston's private clinic. Ethan's expression darkened. You think he was trying to contact someone inside Langston's circle? Maybe to leverage protection? Rachel interjected. No. He told me he was planning to go public. He was scared, yes, but he believed exposure was his best defense. Liam added. Then someone got to him first. Rachel nodded slowly. And now he's gone. And I'm starting to wonder if I'm next. Ethan glanced at her sharply. What do you mean? Rachel opened her bag and slid a plain envelope across the table. Inside were 3 printed photographs. One showed her walking to her car, another of her sitting in the break room. The third, through the glass, showed her inside the neonatal unit with the triplets. They were left in my locker. No message, no note, just these. Liam clenched his jaw. They're not just watching, they're threatening you. Ethan immediately picked up the envelope with gloved hands and handed it to forensics. We'll get prints, trace paper type, ink, anything. But this proves one thing. They've infiltrated deeper than we thought. Someone is watching. You, from inside the hospital. Rachel stood, tense. Then we need to shut this place down, or at least take it apart piece by piece. Staff logs, visitor badges, internal security. Someone had access to areas only employees can enter. That's how they're getting so close. Liam was already writing down names. We start with Dr. Freitas and Dr. Montero. Pull their shift logs, financial records, any complaints filed against them, and cross-reference with Langston's known contacts. Ethan added, also, bring in security. Have them review the last 72 hours of footage, especially anything near the lockers, neonatal wing, and back exits. Rachel shook her head. The cameras aren't safe. Daniel said some of the footage had been routinely erased, not wiped, manipulated, to show false timestamps or looping empty footage. Ethan's tone grew colder. Then we're not dealing with amateurs. We're dealing with a system. And whoever's running it knows exactly how to cover their tracks. An emergency internal audit was launched that same afternoon. Administrative staff, nurses, orderlies, everyone was pulled in for interviews. Rachel sat in on several of them, watching closely for nervous tells, rehearsed stories, or missing details. Most employees were stunned, horrified even by the revelations. But not everyone. When Dr. Helena Montero was brought in, her demeanor was oddly calm. Too calm. She didn't blink when questioned about her night shifts. She offered immediate access to her login, records, and even volunteered to help with the investigation. But Rachel noticed the small things, the slight twitch of her hand when the triplets were mentioned, the forced neutrality in her voice. After she left the room, Rachel turned to Liam. "She's hiding something." He nodded. "She's confident. Because she thinks we have nothing concrete on her." Ethan entered with an update. "Langston's lawyers filed for injunctions against our access to financial records from his subsidiaries, citing confidentiality." Liam scoffed. "He's stalling, but it won't hold." Ethan looked at Rachel. "Meanwhile, we need to protect you. You're too close now. We're moving you to the safe house with Marina, until we flush out who's leaking information." That night, as Rachel packed a bag to leave her apartment, she found a second envelope taped under her car's windshield. This time, there was a note. "Back off. Nurse Foster, you don't want to see what happens next." She showed it to the officers already assigned to her building, and within minutes, a police report was filed and her vehicle impounded for full forensic analysis. "They're escalating," Liam said over the phone. "The closer we get, the more desperate they become." Rachel answered with quiet steel in her voice. "Then let's press harder." She arrived at the safe house an hour later and was greeted by Marina, who was holding Ava in her arms. The child was quiet, resting peacefully against her mother's chest. "You too?" Marina asked. Rachel gave a small nod. "We're both being hunted now, but we're not running. We fight from here." The two women sat together in the small living room, watching the babies sleep. The fragility of the moment only made their commitment stronger. They knew that this wasn't just about exposing criminals, it was about taking back what had been stolen and making sure it never happened again. Meanwhile, the investigation into Daniel's disappearance took a dark turn. His phone was recovered in a dumpster 10 miles from the hospital, stripped of its SIM card and battery. His apartment showed no signs of forced entry, but his laptop was gone. And so was the external hard drive he told Rachel he was using to store evidence. Ethan examined the file Daniel had sent her days before, a partial email exchange between Freitas and Montero, referencing scheduled transfers and clean entries. While not explicit, the implication was clear. They were involved in the movement of infants from one location to another, using hospital cover to mask the trail. Rachel, despite the threats, insisted on returning to the hospital once a day to check on the triplets. "I need to be seen," she told Ethan. "If I disappear completely, they'll know we're scared. I won't give them that." Ethan agreed, reluctantly. Every visit was done under full police escort, and every corner of the hospital was monitored. Still, it wasn't enough to erase the growing paranoia. Somewhere inside those walls were people who knew exactly what had happened to Daniel and what they planned to do next. Liam received a call the following morning from an anonymous number. The voice on the line was modulated, but the message was unmistakable. The nurse knew too much. He talked to the wrong people. He got what was coming. "You should back off too, before someone else disappears." Liam recorded the call and sent it to audio forensics. "They've gone from threatening to admitting," he said to Ethan. "They're cocky or confident we can't touch them." Ethan responded, "Then we prove them wrong. I want full surveillance on Freitas and Montero. I want their phones tapped, their homes watched. I want to know who they talk to and where they sleep. No more waiting." Rachel listened quietly, then stepped forward. "We need to make it public," she said. "Tell the press what happened to Daniel. Leak the threats. Make it harder for them to operate in the shadows." Ethan hesitated. It could spook them, or force a mistake, she replied. They operate on fear and control. If we strip that away, they lose ground. And in that moment, it was clear. The network was starting to crack. The threats were louder, but so was their resistance, and the truth was getting closer. She's in transit. Escort confirmed, Liam said over the comms, his voice clipped and focused. Marina sat in the back seat of the unmarked SUV, eyes fixed on nothing, mind spinning in every direction at once. Her hands, clasped tightly, trembled in her lap. One officer sat beside her, another in the front passenger seat. Liam was driving. "Where are my babies?" she finally asked, her voice fragile but steady. "They're safe," he answered. "We moved them an hour ago. Separate location, full protection. You'll see them soon." Marina nodded once, though the ache in her chest didn't ease. Rachel was already stationed at the pediatric safe house. She'd reviewed every detail of the triplets' transfer personally, from the identity tags to the medical pods they were placed in. "Keep their heart monitors visible at all times," she told the nurses. "Log every sound, every bottle, every change." The lead nurse gave her a cautious look. "We've followed the protocol," Rachel snapped back. "Then follow it again." She wasn't being difficult, she was being thorough. After what they had uncovered, no mistake, no assumption could be tolerated. These weren't just babies, they were survivors, and she wasn't going to let them be vulnerable again. At the safe house, Marina was led into a secured room with no windows and a single screen mounted to the wall. A live feed from the pediatric unit showed her children asleep in their cribs. Her breath caught in her throat. "That's them," she whispered. Ethan, who stood beside her, nodded. "They're okay. Rachel hasn't left their side. She's refusing all breaks." Marina pressed her hand to the screen, her voice low and shaking. "I need to hold them." Ethan replied, "You will. But for now, keeping them apart is the safest option." She didn't argue. She simply stared at them, memorizing their faces again. "Thank you for not giving up on them," she said. Ethan looked at her. "You made it impossible to give up." Back at Langston's estate, the man himself stood before a wall of screens. Surveillance footage showed Marina arriving at the safe house, her face pale but determined. "She's not cracking," one of his men said. "She won't," Langston muttered. "But that nurse, she's a liability. If we can't reach the children, we reach the ones protecting them." He turned away from the monitors. "Send the warning." That evening, Rachel returned to the triplets' room after a brief systems check. A plain envelope had been left on the counter near the sink. No name, no markings. Inside, a photo. Rachel standing beside one of the triplets, time-stamped from earlier that day. On the back, 2 words handwritten in block ink. "Walk away." She didn't flinch. Instead, she folded the photo neatly, placed it in her pocket, and returned to Ava's crib. "Not a chance," she whispered. "Not after everything we've done to keep you here." Hours later, Marina sat on a cot in the safe house, cradling the blanket Rachel had wrapped around Noah days ago. She hadn't slept. She wouldn't, not until she could hold them herself. "They said I lost them," she murmured aloud. "But they were wrong. I just didn't stop looking." In another room, Rachel typed a report with one hand while holding Eli's bottle in the other. The 2 women, in 2 separate places, were united by one thing. They had both chosen to fight, and neither was backing down. And in the dark, as Langston's empire began to crack from within, one truth became clearer than ever. The safest place those children could ever be was in the arms of the women who refused to let them go. "I know a guy," Liam said, pulling Ethan aside after a frustrating debrief where leads kept circling back to dead ends. "He's off the radar. Doesn't work for law enforcement, doesn't trust systems. But if anyone can crack into Langston's hidden data, it's him." Ethan hesitated for a beat. "We're already skirting protocol. Bringing in a hacker could compromise the case." Liam's voice lowered. "Langston already compromised everything. We either move fast and unorthodox, or we lose this forever." Ethan nodded. "Fine, bring him in. But I want results, and I want proof." Later that night, in a small basement studio lit only by monitors and hard drive lights, Liam introduced them to Ash. He was in his 20s, disheveled hoodie, sarcastic mouth, but razor-sharp focus. "You want me to break into the most secure private servers in the country," Ash muttered. fingers already moving over his keyboard. Just another Tuesday. Rachel, seated nearby, folded her arms. You're doing this to help us, or just for the thrill? He grinned. Both. With a few keystrokes, he launched a backdoor script that began crawling through Langston's shell companies. Give me an hour, maybe 2. Don't breathe too loud. Exactly 80 minutes later, Ash paused, eyes narrowing. Got something, and it's bad. He projected the screen onto the wall. Multiple encrypted folders popped open, filled with spreadsheets, transaction logs, and video files. This isn't just about adoptions. It's global. Langston isn't selling children to families. He's supplying them to black market labs, fake orphanages, and clinical trials in countries with no regulation. We're talking hundreds of babies. Rachel's voice caught. And the triplets. Ash ran a search. Within seconds, their files appeared. Project E, Tier 1, high genetic purity, retained for neurological study. Marina's name was listed as the maternal source. Rachel stepped back. They weren't meant to be adopted. They were marked for experimentation. Liam clenched his fists. There are dozens of children here, each tagged with blood type. Medical condition, organ compatibility. It's like inventory. Ash nodded grimly. This is a database for trafficking and research, funded by shell donors connected to Langston's pharmaceutical group. Ethan stepped forward. Download everything. Clone the servers. We're going to need federal authorization to move on this. Ash raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to go that far? Once this is public, it'll bring down more than Langston. Judges, doctors, board members. Some of them are in these files. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then they fall with him. As the data transfer finished, Rachel sat silently, scrolling through the names of other mothers listed. Some of these women were told their babies died. Others were drugged through labor and never saw the children again. Ash confirmed. Some of them were paid to disappear. Others were just erased. Liam turned to Ethan. We expose this. We're not just bringing justice. We're opening every wound Langston buried. Ethan replied, Good. Let the world see it. Marina was informed of the findings hours later. She didn't cry. She asked only one question. Can we use this to stop it from happening again? The team worked through the night. Ash secured 3 backup copies of the files, storing them in separate encrypted locations. Rachel prepared the medical summaries for evidence submission. Liam coordinated with a trusted federal prosecutor. Ethan scheduled a private meeting with the Department of Justice. By morning, a full task force was forming. Silent, strategic, and ready. Ash leaned back, rubbing his eyes. You just declared war on $1 billion network. Ethan answered, No, we're finishing one. And while the system they were fighting had lived in shadows for years, they now held its truth in their hands. Truth powerful enough to dismantle an empire, and finally bring justice to those who had no voice. He took the bait, Ethan confirmed, placing a burner phone on the table in front of Rachel, Liam, and Marina. Langston's intermediary reached out. He thinks Marina is ready to trade the files in exchange for immunity and protection for the children. He wants a face-to-face. Marina sat still, her fingers tightening around a cup of untouched tea. What does he expect me to give him? Ethan answered. A copy of the evidence Ash uncovered. We'll prepare a replica. Real enough to convince him, but clean. Liam nodded. We choose the location. Control every entrance. Wire Marina and record. Everything. Rachel added. And if he doesn't show? Ethan didn't blink. He'll show. He needs to know how much she knows. And he's desperate. The setup was immediate. A decommissioned shipping warehouse was selected. Spacious, isolated, with entry points perfect for a tactical surround. SWAT teams were stationed out of sight, snipers placed on rooftops. Cameras and mics were embedded in lighting rigs, wooden pallets, even a forgotten vending machine. Ash handed Marina a modified flash drive, loaded with dummy files. Looks authentic but won't hold up to forensic review. Enough to scare him. She took it, slipping it into her pocket. And the wire? Built into the jacket button, Liam explained. Press once to trigger backup. Marina nodded once. I'm ready. At 2:06 p.m., Langston arrived, 3 minutes late. He entered through the back door, flanked by 2 men in civilian clothes. His eyes swept the warehouse with a predator's caution before landing on Marina, standing alone beside a metal table. You brought it? He asked, calm but sharp. It's in the drive, she replied, holding it up. But I want a guarantee. My children. No more watching over my shoulder. I disappear, and you never hear my name again. Langston smirked. You think it's that easy? He stepped closer. You cost me everything. You think handing over one piece of evidence will buy you peace? Through her earpiece, Ethan whispered. Keep him talking. Marina didn't flinch. You destroyed lives. I have 3 reasons to hate you more than anything, but I'm tired. Take the files. Leave us alone. Langston reached for the drive. Just as his fingers brushed it, a soft click echoed in her ear. Camera 3 had cut out. Ethan's voice snapped. We've lost visual. Marina, stall. But she never had the chance. One of Langston's men shouted, It's a setup. He reached into his jacket. Marina dove behind the table as a gun fired. Tactical teams stormed the warehouse from every angle. Liam tackled Marina to the ground, shielding her. Move! Go! 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 He shouted into his radio. Bullets rang off metal and concrete. Langston tried to run, but an officer intercepted him with a tackle that sent them both crashing to the ground. Target secure! Someone yelled. The gunfight ended in less than 90 seconds. Outside, Marina sat in the armored van, shaking, clutching the empty flash drive. Her ears rang. Her chest burned. Where's Langston? She asked. Liam, panting beside her, answered. In custody. Alive. Rachel appeared seconds later, kneeling beside her. You did it. He's caught. On record. Everything he said is admissible. Marina looked at them, numb. I thought I'd be relieved. She whispered. But all I feel is cold. Rachel took her hand. That's shock, but it'll pass. You're safe now. Marina didn't answer. She only held tighter. Back at the precinct, Langston refused to speak. You'll never prove the rest, he told Ethan. The files mean nothing without someone to explain them. Ethan leaned forward. You're wrong. The people you hurt, they're speaking now. Every mother, every nurse, every life you tried to erase is testifying. And now, you're the one who disappears. That night, Marina watched her children sleep from the safety of the hospital wing, the room, heavily guarded. Noah stirred in his crib, tiny hands curling. For the first time, Marina leaned back and closed her eyes. The war wasn't over, but the monster at the center of it had finally fallen. Go! Go now! Liam shouted, pulling Marina through the back hallway of the pediatric unit as alarms blared from the building's east wing. Officers scrambled, reports of armed intruders flooding the radio channels. Rachel had just finished checking Ava's vitals when the first gunshot echoed from the corridor. She instinctively threw herself over the triplets' crib, shielding them with her body. Lock this door, she screamed to the nurse behind her, who fumbled to secure the emergency latch. Ethan, we have contact. Multiple targets inside, Liam radioed as he guided Marina toward the secure stairwell. It's Langston's people. They're here for the babies. Inside the nursery, chaos unfolded in seconds. A masked man forced open the side entrance, tackling the nurse to the floor. Rachel rose, placing herself between the man and the cribs. You're not touching them, she hissed. He pulled, a knife slashing forward, and she felt it tear through her shoulder before she collapsed. Still, she reached for the alarm button with her other hand and hit it. Red lights flared across the unit. The attacker grabbed one of the carriers, Noah's, and ran. By the time officers broke through the door, he was gone. Rachel lay on the floor, covered in blood, whispering, They took him. They took Noah. Liam rushed into the nursery moments later, just as Rachel was lifted onto a stretcher. Where is he? Marina cried, pushing past 2 officers. Her eyes went straight to the 2 remaining cribs. Ava and Eli, still safe. Where's Noah? Her voice cracked, her body trembling as her eyes darted around. No one answered fast enough. She turned to Rachel, who was barely conscious. They got him, Rachel managed to whisper. I couldn't stop them. Marina collapsed to her knees, her screams echoing off the sterile walls. No, no, not again! Ethan arrived seconds after, coordinating lockdown. I want every exit sealed. Get air support, drones, helicopters. I want a citywide search started now. Officers moved into action, but the damage was done. Surveillance footage revealed the kidnappers had planned the breach with precision. Cameras were disabled 5 minutes before the attack. The van they used was stolen and abandoned 10 blocks away. It was surgical, Liam muttered. They only wanted one, and they got him. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He was watching Marina through the glass. She hadn't moved from the floor, arms wrapped around herself, rocking slightly, broken. At the hospital, Rachel underwent emergency surgery. The blade had missed major arteries, but the blood loss was severe. She awoke hours later to Liam seated beside her. "Is he back?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Liam shook his head. "We're trying. We've got checkpoints at every exit route, but whoever took him had help." Rachel closed her eyes. "I should have done more." Liam took her hand. "You did everything. You saved 2 of them." Her lips trembled. "But I lost one." Liam leaned closer. "Then we get him." Back at the precinct, Ash pulled up a signal ping. Brief, but traceable. "I think they used a private airstrip 20 miles outside the city. If they got airborne, they're likely heading to a known route Langston used before." Ethan stood. "Scramble the team. We're not waiting for confirmation." Meanwhile, Marina had been sedated, her grief too severe to manage without medical aid. But even in that state, she murmured his name again and again. "Noah, Noah." By the time the tactical unit reached the airstrip, the plane was gone. The hangar was empty, the manifest forged, but a piece of Noah's blanket was found near the runway, enough to confirm he'd been there. Ethan stood in the doorway of the empty hangar, fists clenched. "They planned this for weeks," Liam replied. "Then we plan harder. We bring him home." That night, the hospital was silent, but the war had reignited. Marina had survived too much to lose him again, and now, the entire team had one mission: bring Noah back, whatever it took. "They found him," Liam said, entering the operations room with urgency. "Private property on the outskirts of Clearwater. Isolated mansion, land heavily monitored. A satellite ping from the stolen aircraft led us there." Ethan stood from his chair immediately. "We have visual confirmation?" Liam nodded. "Infrared picked up a child-sized heat signature in the east wing. Matches Noah's size and movement patterns. He's alive." Rachel, still recovering from her shoulder wound, leaned forward. "And Langston?" "He's there," Liam confirmed. "Security team of 5. Some ex-military. He's not hiding anymore. He's preparing to run." Ethan didn't hesitate. "We move now." A full tactical unit deployed within the hour. Black SUVs rolled down the tree-lined road toward the gated estate. Drones scanned from above. Snipers took positions. At 03:14 a.m. the breach began. Silent entry. Coordinated. Strikes. Within minutes, guards were subdued and the perimeter was secure. Inside, Langston stood at the top of the grand staircase, arms raised in mock surrender. "You're too late," he said, smirking. But downstairs an officer's voice crackled through comms. "We have the boy. Repeat, we have Noah. He's safe." Rachel, waiting just outside, broke into tears. Marina, trembling in the back of the medic vehicle, whispered, "Is it real?" Ethan opened the door and nodded. "It's over. He's back." Marina rushed into the arms of the officer carrying Noah. He reached for her instantly, burying his face, in her neck as she broke down in relief. "I've got you," she sobbed. "You're home, baby. You're safe." The child clung to her like he'd never let go. Around them, officers exhaled in silence, the weight of the mission finally lifting. Langston, now in handcuffs, was led to a transport van. Rachel approached him, her arm still in a sling. "You stole children," she said, voice calm but fierce. "And you thought the world would look away. But you didn't count on one thing." Langston raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Rachel replied. "A mother who refused to disappear." The trial that followed was one of the most high-profile in the country's recent history. Over 6 weeks, prosecutors laid out mountains of evidence: medical falsifications, illegal experiments, financial records, and testimonies from dozens of women whose babies were stolen or declared dead. Marina's own testimony was the turning point. Standing before the jury, holding Noah's hospital bracelet in her hand, she said, "I was told I imagined my children. That grief made me delusional, but I wasn't grieving a lie. I was grieving theft, and now I'm here to take it all back." Langston was found guilty on all counts: human trafficking, fraud, medical abuse, criminal conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in federal prison without parole. As he was led out of the courtroom, he passed Marina and the children, Noah resting on her shoulder, Eli clinging to her leg, Ava asleep in Rachel's arms. He didn't speak. He didn't look back. The weeks that followed brought more than just justice. The hospital at the center of it all, once known as St. Mary's, was shut down for restructuring. Under federal guidance and with public support, it reopened 6 months later as the Marina Blake Center for Maternal Care, offering legal aid, trauma support, and shelter for mothers affected by medical negligence or abuse. A permanent wing was dedicated to Rachel, now leading a team of ethical care specialists. Ethan and Liam, now both in senior roles, continued their investigations, determined to dismantle every remnant of Langston's international network. Marina was granted full and final custody of her children. No more courtrooms, no more signatures. Just a document that confirmed what she already knew in her soul. They were hers, forever. Months later, on the day of the center's public inauguration, Marina stood at the entrance with all 3 children beside her. She had declined every interview, every media appearance, but on this day, she agreed to speak. Her words were brief, but unforgettable. They took my children and told me to forget. I remembered, and now, because I remembered, they can never do it again. The crowd erupted in applause. But for Marina, the true moment came later, away from cameras, in a small garden behind the center. There, she walked a winding path holding Noah in one arm, Ava in the other, while Eli toddled just ahead. No security detail, no panic, just peace. Rachel joined her minutes later, watching as the children played. "You did it," she said. Marina turned to her. "We did. You stayed when everyone else turned away. You listened when no one else did." Rachel smiled. "That's what mothers do, even the ones who didn't give birth." As the sun rose, Marina sat on a bench with her children surrounding her. For the first time in years, her body wasn't braced for loss. Her mind wasn't preparing for battle. Her heart wasn't weighed down by fear. It was full. This wasn't just the end of a nightmare. It was the beginning of a life no one could steal again, and it belonged to them. If this story moved you like it moved us, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Edward's Tales for more gripping narratives like this one. Tell us in the comments what part hit you the hardest. And most importantly, share this video with someone who would appreciate a powerful story of justice, motherhood, and survival. See you in the next tale.